Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We have a lot to talk about from the season opening games. We had close ones, we had blowouts, we had rivalries, including a battle for an axe, and we will talk about it all here on the podcast, recapping what we saw in week one, what does it mean for week two, and everything in between. For those just joining, please enjoy every week on Wednesday evenings when this comes out. You can check our social media, Herald Democrat on Facebook, All-Texomaland on Facebook, my Twitter, at Jason Del Rosa. We put all the links out there. Try to get it out to you so you can get your recap from the last week and get what you need going into the games for the coming week. For non-district, we kind of bounce around. We'll talk about the all-local games first and then work our way down. Once we get into to district play, we usually start from the top and the biggest schools and work our way down to the bottom. And we give you a little bit of everything about what's going on for that week, what it means, what's happening, all that good stuff. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. And there's only one place to start, as we do in every second podcast for the last couple of years, because it is the biggest attraction on the slate now that it's the season opener, and that is, of course, the Battle of the Axe, this being the 126th version, and Sherman comes away with the 31-13 victory over Denison, snapping the 11-game winning streak by the Yellow Jackets, getting it back in Sherman for the first time since 2012, and this was a game that Sherman jumped out right away, goes down and scores on its opening drive, is up 14-0 after the first quarter, is up 24-7 at halftime. Denison got it down to 7 points at 14-7 on the first play of the second quarter. But again, the Bearcats finding a way to respond to that. They go down and score, kick a field goal as well, and then kind of a defensive slog for the second half. No scoring in the third quarter, and then we get a touchdown from each team in the fourth quarter. The last Denison touchdown coming as time expired. So this was a 31-7 game, essentially before that the very final play, which obviously at that point Sherman certainly doesn't care about because they were in celebration mode on the sideline, and it was. Honestly, the way you kind of thought Sherman was going to win this game, we talked last week, they have these receivers that can make plays, and especially in this game, Micah Hunt with 2 touchdown catches, 6 receptions on the day for 131 yards, kicks off the scoring with a 23-yard touchdown grab, and then seals the game with a 77-yard catch and run on a receiver screen on the left sideline. To put the exclamation point on it. But Caleb Orr ends up 13 of 17 passing, 189 yards. Had another touchdown, so he had 3 on the day. His third was to Hector Pena in the first quarter. On the ground, Sherman rushes for almost 200 yards. Jacavian Hughes leads the way. He has 15 carries for 134 yards. Wasn't able to get in the end zone, but he had 2 big runs of 40 plus yards in some key spots. Kane Bowen has 6 carries for 32 yards and does get a touchdown on the ground. And then Brandon Mendoza kicked the 38-yard field goal and the little under 3 minutes to go in the first half to stretch that lead from 2 touchdowns to 3 scores at 24-7. So it was like I said, the way Sherman was going to win, they had to get some big plays from the receivers, and Hunt was the exception in terms of a big number game. But Randy Nelson had 4 catches for 31 yards. Colby Ray Short had 2 for 15, and then you had Pena with his 12-yard touchdown catch. And the thing about those other guys with Nelson and Short with their 6 catches, they didn't go for a lot of yards necessarily, but for those who were at the game, a lot of them came on third down, and they either got the first down or they got close enough that Sherman was able to go for it. And this happened early on. The Bearcats were wanting to be aggressive, wanting to show that they were going to do whatever it took to win this game. And part of being able to do that was having a third and I think it was maybe a third and 12, and Randy Nelson gets 11 yards. And you say, well, he didn't get the first down, but they were in a position on a 4th and 1 that they were able to go for it. And there were a couple times early that Sherman had 4th and 1s that they converted because a receiver made a play and fought for some extra yardage to get as close as possible to the first down marker instead of keeping it 4th and 3, 4th and 4 where you're probably not going to risk that and you're going to punt. And the reason Sherman felt good was because of the running game. The one thing in this winning streak by Denison is that Sherman has had trouble moving the ball on the ground. They become one-dimensional, and that's led to them not having as much success as they would hope. And Sherman came right out. They ran the first 7 plays of the game. They ran the ball. They picked up consistent yardage. 5 yards, 4 yards, 8 yards. It wasn't anything super flashy. Like I said, they only really had 2 huge runs by Hughes, but they were able to be consistent and not put themselves in all those, second and 11, 3rd and 17s, because they couldn't move the ball on the ground. So give credit to the offense as a whole there to be able to do that. And then defensively, like we said, they basically held Denison to 1 touchdown for the game, especially when it mattered. The Jackets finished with under 300 yards of offense. The leaders for them in this game, Thomas Rendon on the ground, 12 carries for 68 yards. Corbin Johnson had 3 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Douglas had 4 catches for 31 yards. But obviously the opposite for Denison in this game, as consistent as Sherman was offensively, Denison just could not get anything going in the first half outside of the touchdown drive, which ended with a 27-yard touchdown pass from Ty Rhodes to Johnson. Every other possession in that half for Denison was a 3-and-out. And then the start of the second half, Denison goes 3-and-out. And then they finally got the next first down outside of that touchdown drive early in the second quarter, and then a bad snap, lost 17 yards, and that was essentially like a 3-and-out because you're so far behind trying to get the first down there that they weren't able to do that. So there just wasn't a whole lot going on, especially until late. And like we said, at that point, it's 31-7, and the game's almost over. Before they put together that drive at the end, there was a potential chance, and again, this goes back to the Sherman defense making a play. Denison had blocked a field goal on a previous Sherman possession, and then they forced a punt on the next one to get the ball back. They have good field position. They're able to move the ball into the red zone. It looks like they're about to score. And make it 24-14 with enough time left that they're going to get multiple possessions. But it would have been a game at that point in the second half. And Kane Bowen strips the ball carrier, and Alonzo King recovers it at the Sherman 8-yard line. I believe it was the 8-yard line. It was definitely inside the 10. And that's a huge play because then it becomes, okay, how is Sherman going to respond? They had not looked very good on their drives to start the second half, but they still had that 24-7 lead. If it would have been 24-14, for about the last quarter and a half, that would have been a very interesting finish to the game. But all credit to Sherman. I know it's a long time coming for them. This was a streak that was going to end at some point. I know Sherman. A lot of the guys that I talked to after the game for Sherman, that are seniors, is they brought up the game 2 years ago when they were sophomores. A lot of those guys were contributors in that game or played in that game or were on the sidelines in that game. And that was a game that, Sherman had a 21-7 lead in the second half. It looked like they were going to win and end the streak then. Denison was able to block a punt for a touchdown, tie the game, and then eventually win it in the fourth quarter, 28-21. And that was obviously a big thing on their minds in the second half when they're coming out of the locker room. They experienced what Denison potentially could do, and they made sure that it didn't happen this time. So they're off to a 1-0 start. It's the first time in a very long time that's happened, over a decade, that Sherman has started 1-0. And they're going to they have a short turnaround. They don't get to celebrate as long as they would have liked, because they're going to go to Prosper Rock Hill for a 7 o'clock game on Thursday night to end district play, because their district is so big. They and Denison only have 2 non-district games. So they're going to go down and play Rock Hill, who lost its opener 10-7 against Timber Creek. This is an interesting matchup because the head coach at Rock Hill is Mark Wilkinson, who was Sherman's defensive coordinator a couple years ago. He's in his third year as Rock Hill's head coach. There's a couple other Bearcats on that former Bearcat assistants on that staff. So that's a fun little side plot to this game. But obviously the big thing for Sherman is, can you either carry the momentum so that you're going into district play at 2-0? Can you avoid a letdown because of getting the axe back and all the focus on that and all the everything that surrounds the celebration of finally getting the job done there? Is there going to be a letdown with a short week, with all that turnaround? It doesn't mean a lot record-wise, because obviously the 8 games that follow will determine if Sherman gets into the playoffs. But this is a chance, for them to get to 2-0. Again, it's been a very long time since that's happened. You're talking about trying to do that for the first time since 2012. I think you want to prove not only to yourself, because I think they think that they're obviously a better team, over last year, but to show some of the people in the district that Sherman is a different team as well. Rock Hill is a 6A team. They've had some success, I just kind of looking at their game from last week. Obviously, defensive battle. Is there a chance that this could be a defensive battle between the two teams? But it's a very good chance for Sherman to get to 2-0 and have a chance to go into district play with that momentum. And Denison, on the flip side, again, can you overcome what has been a disappointment? Obviously you don't want to be a team that ends a streak like that. It happened. Whether it was Sherman or anybody else to open your season, you've got to bounce back because you've got a game to get ready for district play. And that's going to be a halfway decently long road trip out to Decatur at 7 o'clock on Friday. Decatur's coming off a loss as well. They lost to Brock 27-7 in a game that was 27-0 before Decatur got on the board in the fourth quarter. And that's going to be Denison's challenge. They had some injuries last week in the game. Those guys are probably not going to play again this week, so you're going to have some guys that are going to get some opportunities right from the jump to practice and prepare, as opposed to potentially just being thrown out there like they did during the game last week. But again, this is a matchup where you have two teams coming off losses where they struggled offensively, and they need to find some positive things. If you're Denison, you start district. Decatur does not start district the next week, but you do, and you've got a very tough district that you're trying to be a playoff team in. And so it's been mixed. during this win streak, Denison has obviously won that first week, and then they've lost the next week, and that momentum hasn't carried over in some of those years. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Decatur's a program that has been really good the last couple of years. They made the 4A Division I semifinals each of the last 2 seasons. Last year they lost to Anna 38-27. And of course we'll talk about Anna. We've talked about Anna. We'll talk about Anna this week because they're playing a local team. But Anna moved up into 5A. They're in Denison's district after winning the 4A Division I state championship. And Decatur's got several of those guys back. And obviously losing to Brock. For those who've listened to the podcast the last couple of years, Gunner and Brock are always clashing. Whitesboro and Brock have always been clashing. That is one of the better programs. So to lose to them is definitely not a bad loss. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Decatur handles that, because they got off to a bad start. I think in getting ready for the Denison preview this week, I think Decatur started 1-4 last year and made it all the way to the state semifinals and making the Final Four. So they're not going to be hanging their heads, I don't think, too much. And again, Denison's got to make that road trip, go to a place against we think is a pretty good team. So we'll see how they bounce back. And again, this is the first time the program's had to do that in a really long time. Obviously all the kids on the varsity, that all they've ever known is opening with that win over Sherman. And now that hasn't happened. So we'll see what that looks like for Denison going to Decatur, and that's a 7:00 start on Friday night. A couple of the other local games from this past week, all Grayson County matchups. The first one we'll talk about is Pottsboro 35 and Bells 32. This was a back and forth game, close game, which I think a lot of people expected and were excited about, because you have two of the better programs in the area, always making the playoffs, making runs, getting to the third, fourth round. Obviously Pottsboro having a little more recent success getting, being a state runner-up, back in 2019. And just always being, double-digit wins, 9 wins, really good records, and they hadn't played each other in forever. So this was I think one a lot of people wanted to see how it went. Obviously, we talked about last week, both teams losing key players, but here they are scoring in the 30s, doing a lot of the action on the ground actually for Pottsboro, which was interesting, just because of the fact that they lost Major McBride. But again, you have both teams rushing for over, Pottsboro rushes for 200 yards on the nose, and Bells, of course, that's what they do. They run the ball all the time. They had over 250, but Pottsboro comes away with the win 35-32. Carson Nix returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown for Pottsboro, and so they were able to jump right to the lead. And they were at 14-0 before Bells was able to get on the board. Pottsboro led by Caden Humphrey, 25 carries, 135 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He was also 14 of 17 passing for 172 yards and a touchdown that went to Jet Mackey. Xavier Brady led the Cardinals with 6 catches for 73 yards. Garrett Doris added 4 catches for 57 yards. And Nix added 18 carries for 62 yards. And for Bells, their rally comes up just short. They were able to get within the 3 points with a little over 8 minutes left. But Pottsboro was able to hold them off the scoreboard the rest of the way and hang on to the win. Bryson Wright had 7 carries for 100 yards. Tucker Kreitz, 13 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown. He also had a 40-yard punt return for a touchdown. And Bryson Thompson, 13 carries for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it was, like I said, it was what you would expect from these two teams. Each gets a special team score. Back and forth, from the second quarter on, Pottsboro scores, Bell scores, Pottsboro scores, Bell scores, Pottsboro. That's the back and forth of two really good teams being able to keep it close, and so that was that was one of the games everybody really wanted to see. And now they've got two two tough tasks in week 2. Obviously playing each other, give them a lot of credit in week 1 to kick off against each other. But it doesn't get any easier because Bells is going to host Whitesboro at 7:30 on Friday. Whitesboro's coming off a win against North Lamar, and again you have another all local matchup. This one is a little more familiar. This is the 5th straight year that they've played each other, and they've had some really good games. They've had games go to overtime, and Bells won last year. It's kind of been sort of back and forth of recent years. Bells has not started 0-2 since 2019, which was the first year under Coach West. And again, I think this is going to be another good game. We'll talk about Whitesboro here in a bit as we recap their game. But a young team got off to a good start. They're going to want to keep that rolling. And you have a Bells team that needs to bounce back. And again, I think this is going to be another one of the games this week that everybody wants to see, to kind of see where everybody kind of stacks up against each other. And Pottsboro is going to play a little bigger opponent as they host Sanger. Sanger is coming off a 31-7 loss against Paris. And this is an interesting matchup that I'm sure Van Alstyne's going to be looking at because Sanger's in their district. But again, this is another chance for Pottsboro to kind of show where they're at. They have usually started off at 2-0. This would be the 3rd straight year. They're trying to do that for the 5th time in 6 years. Sanger's got some athletes. I don't know if they're ready to to make the jump. I think they are. Former Denison coach Chad Rogers is over there. And they were building last year. I did their game against Van Alstyne actually because it came on a bye week for Sherman and Denison, I think, or somebody had a Thursday game, so I was able to get over to watch Van Alstyne against them. And they were very young. I think he said, they only started like 3 seniors maybe. And they've got some talent there. Obviously Paris is always a really good program. That's a tough way to start off the season. But Pottsboro, they're not afraid in their non-district schedule. We'll talk about that as it goes on, because they've got some former district opponent. They've got a former district opponent coming up, who they've tussled with a lot. So we'll see what happens for both those teams. I think Bells Whitesboro is obviously going to be a really good game. And I'm interested to see what Sanger and Pottsboro do. The thing about Pottsboro was we didn't know how they were going to handle things offensively. When I talked to Coach Poe for the season preview, he said, last year as a sophomore, Caden Humphrey didn't have to really be the main focus at quarterback because you had Major McBride, who was going to get a lot of carries and do what he did, which is gain a lot of yards and score a lot of touchdowns. This year was going to be different, and the accuracy is there, obviously in the passing game, and he had a big night on the ground. And if they're going to be successful, that might be, that's how they're going to get things done. And they do have some receivers. A couple of those guys from last year, are back. But obviously the early returns are good. Pottsboro almost had 400 yards of offense. Didn't have a turnover. Scored in the 30s. So that's a good start for them, and they're going to look to keep that going when they host Sanger on Friday night at 7:30. And then the third all-local game from this past week actually was on Thursday. I got a chance to do that as well as doing the Battle of the Axe on Friday. And that was Collinsville 40 and Tioga 13. This was a game, again, where you have a rivalry game, and one team got out to an extremely good start. Collinsville is up 22. Is it 20? Yeah, I guess because they missed the extra points. So that would be, 19 to nothing early on. It's going to be 20-0 early in the second quarter, and they really didn't look back. That was a game that was 34-6 at halftime. And again, much like the Sherman Denison game, nothing scored in the third quarter. Both teams scored a touchdown in the fourth, and by the time Tioga scored again, it was 40-6. And so this was a game where you wanted to see what Collinsville was going to look like. We talked in the preview and last week about all these guys were gone, all this big senior class that had these back-to-back 12-2 seasons, the best seasons in school history, and now we're going to replace them with either guys waiting their turn, some young guys, and they made it look like those guys never left, winning a game like they did, putting up over 400 yards offense. J.J. Jenkins, as a sophomore, steps in for older brother Logan, who graduated, goes 23 of 25 for 226 yards and 5 touchdowns. And his favorite target was Cash Morgan. He had 11 catches for 103 yards and 3 of those 5 touchdowns. Chad Davison's only catch was a 34-yard touchdown. He also returned an interception, 36 yards for a score. Garrett Trevino had 6 carries for 53 yards and caught a touchdown pass on a little receiver screen. And it was kind of, like I said, it looked like the Collinsville of old. Tioga leading guys for them. Johnny Dorpinghouse had 2 carries for 41 yards. One of those was a big reverse to help set up the first score for Tioga. Austin Norwood, 5 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. Dorpinghouse also had 7 catches for 45 yards. Jonathan Hernandez had 7 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. Big thing for Tioga, 3 turnovers. Obviously, one of them was the interception return. One was on a punt return that was a fumble that Collinsville was able to turn to a touchdown there. And then another interception as well. And it was obviously a disappointing start for them. Yes, they had changes last year, especially at the quarterback spot. But a lot of the guys are back on we talked about in the preview. They got to the region semifinals last year, and I think big things are obviously expected. And again, it is the week 1. Everybody wants to overreact because that's all we know. And so it'll be interesting to see how Tioga bounces back from a game that I don't know if they thought they wouldn't necessarily not even win, but have this game not be competitive. Like I said, it was 34-6 at half, and it did not feel sort of that close. But the good thing about it is they've got a couple games to get on track. Tioga is going to go on the road and play at Ponder. 7 o'clock on Friday. Ponder is coming off a 61-0 win against Venus. This is an interesting matchup. This has the potential, even with what we saw from Tioga last week. This before the season looked like it had shootout written all over it. This could be some. I don't want to throw out a score and be totally wrong, but like this has 56-49 or 49-35 written all over it. I think these are 2 pretty good offenses, and it was going to be a good test no matter what for Tioga. Obviously playing a 3A Division I school, jumping up from going all the way through to the top of 3A. I don't think they're borderline. They might even be a borderline 4A just based on the numbers that they had last year. I thought they were pretty close realignment. But I think this had an offensive battle written all over it before the season. And then Collinsville, they are going to take on a very familiar foe in Cooper. That's at 7 o'clock at home on Friday night. Cooper lost last week 27-12 against Grand Saline. This has turned into one of these fun non-district rivalry type things. They've met every year since 2020. Collinsville has obviously, like we said, the last couple of years they're 12-2. Both of their losses, obviously in the playoffs, were in the state quarterfinals to the eventual champion Albany. Their only two losses in the regular season the last 2 years were to Cooper, who had some really good seasons of their own. Last year this game was 42-35. Both sides, Cooper also lost some key guys as well. So I think this has a chance to be a fun game as well. Both these coaches know each other. They know what they like to do. They're going to run, the same offenses that they've always run. The question is, can some of these new guys, avoid the roller coaster of being up and down week to week? If they can be consistent, again, I think this could be another fun game as well. And kind of show maybe where these teams are in relation to when they get into district play for both of them, because obviously they're both expected to be playoff teams at minimum. The question is, how good can they be in their districts? And so it's fun that these guys are playing each other again. So those are the matchups for Tioga and Collinsville. Again, Tioga's going on the road to Ponder, and Collinsville has a home game at 7 o'clock against Cooper on Friday night. So those are the three local games for all, involving all six of our teams here in Grayson County. And so we'll kind of bop around on the rest of the teams that played last week. And probably the best place to start there is the one that had the most outrageous score, and that was Van Alstyne 72, Life Waxahachie 0. This was a game that got out of hand right from the start. Van Alstyne was up 36-0 after the first quarter. It was only 44-0 at halftime. So you can see how the Panthers took their foot off the gas at least at that point, and then they scored a pair of touchdowns in each of the last two quarters to get to 72. Obviously defense shutting somebody out. That's the best place to start. It's the first time Van Alstyne has shut out its first opponent since 2000. It's the last time that Van Alstyne scored at least 70 points to open a season was 1992. This was the 1992 is also the last time they won a game this lopsided. There were a couple games in that 1992 season that were very lopsided. One of those was against Community, which was 77-0. And so going back into that 92 season. So and from a stat standpoint, Life Waxahachie had 34 total yards. They ran the ball 37 times and gained 25 yards. Had 3 turnovers, 2 of them fumbles. And so stellar performance there for Van Alstyne. And then offensively, Brady Carson, 6 of 6 passing, 83 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran twice for 40 yards, scored on both of those, so he had a hand in 5 touchdowns. Braden Miller, 3 carries for 51 yards and a touchdown. He caught a 14-yard touchdown for his lone reception, and he had a 51-yard punt return for a score. Jack Williams, 4 carries, 65 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Tim Moore had 2 catches for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns to round out what the Panthers were able to do. They are going to go on the road this week as they head out to Alvarado. Van Alstyne and Alvarado may sound familiar because the baseball teams have met the last couple years with Van Alstyne getting those wins. They're off to a 1-0 start. They won against Godley 48-21. And this obviously should be a much tougher test than Life Waxahachie. Alvarado went 7-5 last season. They lost to Salina in the second round of the 4A Division I bracket. So I assume 72-0 is not in the offing at all. And obviously, if you want to be challenged, this is probably going to be the week for that. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for Van Alstyne. They're going on the road. That's a pretty decent chunk of a road trip to make that trip out there. And I obviously, I'm sure they've been warned by Coach Miller and the coaching staff that it's not going to be as easy. Don't expect to be up 36-0 in the first quarter. We've got to be ready to battle. A team that has playoff experience, knows what it's like to win, and it's coming off a pretty good size win this last week as well. But you couldn't have scripted a better start for Van Alstyne. They probably could have put up a lot more impressive number than what they did. All things considered. But it's very hard to complain when you look at a score like that. The question is, as their path gets tougher, how are they going to be able to handle that? And I think Alvarado was a good test to see that after that win last week. So we'll see what happens with Van Alstyne when they go on the road this week, 7:30 on Friday night to Alvarado. To double back to another game that we have next week, which is the Whitesboro at Bells game. We mentioned Whitesboro is 1-0 because they beat Parish North Lamar 48-25 at home. And this was another one of those games where you want to see what a young group is going to be able to do. Obviously, a lot of changes, not a lot of seniors with this group. Questions at quarterback coming in. You have two sophomores battling. Who's going to be able to win the job, produce if they do win the job, and then find a way to make things happen. And Whitesboro was able to do that. They win this game. And again, a game that wasn't necessarily all that close after the first quarter. Whitesboro was able to kind of build up a lead. North Lamar added some touchdowns, towards the end, to make it look a little more exciting. But Colt Fagan got the job as the quarterback, and he made the most of it. 15 of 20 passing for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also ran for a touchdown. Braden Bomar, 5 catches, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. Levi Waddell, 7 carries, 57 yards and a score. Camden Stevens returned an interception for a touchdown and also added 13 carries for 85 yards. Mason Scarborough recovered a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown. Ritt Rosinski had a touchdown catch as well. This was, like I said, we wanted to see what a sort of a young, newish look Whitesboro was going to do, and that was a good start for them. And again, what are they going to be able to do against a good Bells team? I think again after I think if this is not there's one other game that I think people are going to be interested about that we'll talk about here in a second for the games this week and for matchups. But if it's not far behind, this is Whitesboro Bells. I think is the number one game for people to see how that comes out. And I think again the way Pottsboro Bells went last week, I think there might be a decent chance that it could be that way as well. And the only reason I say that is because what Whitesboro was able to do defensively against North Lamar was enforcing the turnovers. 3 of those were interceptions. Trip Howard had 2 of them, and then obviously the interception returned by Stevens. Everybody knows Bell's slot T. They're not going to throw anywhere near the potential to have that many turnovers in that situation. Easton Branham last week for Bells, he only threw 3 times, period. So that's not going to be repeatable if you're Whitesboro, just because of the opponent that you're facing. They're not, North Lamar threw it 31 times. The Bells might not throw 31 times all season. There have been seasons where they haven't done that, because that's just not what they do. So that's going to be the interesting thing, is when you have an opponent that is not going to be able to give you those opportunities. You made the most of them last week, but there aren't going to be that many this week. So I think there's a chance that we could have another shootout. Like I said, these two have played each other, very, very close the last couple of years. It always seems to come down to the fourth quarter. Somebody, either has to stop a touchdown drive or go down and score, and find a way to do it. But obviously, with Whitesboro off to a good start, I think a lot of people were wondering what that was going to look like. And that was obviously a good first showing for them. And like I said, they've got a chance to go 2-0 by going to Bells at 7:30 on Friday night. So again, that'll be a huge matchup right there. The other game that I think people will probably want to pay attention to, just for all the hoopla that probably comes not just here in Texoma, but from a North Texas standpoint, from a statewide Texas standpoint, is Gunner at Anna. Gunner opened its season last week with a 23-14 victory against Houston Kincaid. Like we said, we didn't know a whole lot about Houston Kincaid. They're a private school, and obviously they've had success at their level. They're obviously a bigger school than Gunner, and you didn't know how they were going to handle it. And this was a dogfight. This was a game that was close throughout. But Gunner finds a way to get the job done. They have a 10-7 lead at halftime. End up turning that into the 23-14 final. Brock Body, 15 carries, 36 yards, touchdown, returned a punt, 51 yards for a score. Preston Tarpley got the nod at quarterback. We talked about how that was a battle in the preseason and how potentially they could play the two guys there. He gets the nod and is 18 of 26 passing for 193 yards with a touchdown and interception. He also kicked a field goal. We talked about how good of a kicker he is as well. Cohen Scallern, 5 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. Dylan Tokar's the other quarterback option potentially. He had 5 carries for 52 yards, and Jake Campidi chipped in 3 carries for 36 yards as well. And so that's win number 32 in a row for Gunner. That sets a school record. The school record had been the 31, and that surpassed the 2016-2017 group, which went, the 2016 team went 16-0, and then the 2017 team went 15-0, and then lost in the championship game when it had a chance to do back-to-back undefeated seasons. The current group obviously did back-to-back undefeated seasons, but Gunner didn't have a game 1 2 years ago, so they only went 15-0 instead of 16-0. But so now we're at 32 in a row. It was also their 38th straight regular season win as well, and that both of those streaks are going to be tested in a big way this week because of that game at Anna. Anna did lose their opener 52-48 against Oakland, Tennessee, and they are, like we said when we talked about them earlier, here's a team that won the 4A Division I state championship, moved up to 5A in the realignment. They're in Denison's district. So you have the defending 3A Division I champion against last year's 4A Division I champion. It it's an ambitious schedule. Obviously with playing the private school in Kincaid, playing Anna off the season that they have, and as significantly large enrollment disparity as they have. Gunner's going to play Salina next week, so that'll be another one. But obviously this is one everybody wants to look at because the feeling out there is that obviously Anna is going to win. They're expected to win. All the computer polls and prognostications and all that sort of stuff. But the big thing with people want to see is how close does Gunner make it, or if they actually do end up winning, what does that look like? I know Anna lost their whole defense from last year's championship team. They do have a lot of key guys on offense that came back. They have been very explosive, might be the wrong word, but they've been very efficient from an offensive standpoint. Obviously, they scored 48 points last week, albeit in a loss. The thing for Gunner, they had some guys get hurt last week. I know one's not going to play. I think one may not play, and that's in addition to some of the guys that were hurt going into the season. And we talked about before the season, what Gunner does in these first three games, if they had lost last week and were sitting at 0-3 going into their non-district finale against Sanger, it's not going to matter until we get to where they lose to somebody either in their district or obviously in the playoffs, because no matter what they do in these games, people are still expecting them to potentially go at least all the way to the championship game, if not win it, if not win the region again, because they've been the region champ every year during this run since 2016. The biggest thing is, can they avoid what has turned into a bad start injury-wise? And if they can do that, and guys are especially available once we get to the playoffs, then obviously that's the ultimate goal for them. But this is, everybody's watching it for that reason. Gunner played Walnut Grove last year, obviously two totally different scenarios. But again, that was a brand new program playing its second game ever. But again, it was a school that was literally 5 times the size of Gunner. This is the same thing. Anna's probably actually a little bit bigger than Walnut Grove. And they have, big time talent, and it's a very ambitious schedule. So, but a lot of people believe Gunner can hang with Anna, if not for most of the game, maybe all the way to the end. And if you told me Gunner won, I wouldn't be surprised. But that's a tough task, based on, like I said, the injuries that they're dealing with, the schedule that they have, and obviously, people may think they're nuts for playing it, but for them, I think they kind of look at it as, the end result is there's no losing to playing good people and to seeing where you're at. And if they win, or if they keep it close, even if it's for a half or 3/4 or down to the last play, that tells everybody in 3A Division II you're in a world of hurt. If they're able to win this game and keep it close, whatever they do with Salina next week, that shows how good their team is this year, let alone compared to what they've been able to do during this run. And so that's going to be really interesting to see. Like I said, I know a lot of people have their eyes on that one for sure this week, just because of the potential of what it might mean for where Gunner is. But again, they got a win that I think maybe some people didn't think they were going. I thought that was supposed to be a close game against Kincaid, and it was, and they found a way to win. And I will not you can't put anything past Gunner when it comes to the people they play. Because they've beaten some big time opponents, obviously. And Anna's going to be no difference. It's on the road, 7:30 on Friday night for Gunner at Anna. The next team we'll talk about, let's go down to the 2A level, because we had a couple teams win their openers there. And we will start with the White Tigers among those 2A schools. They opened up with a 57-12 victory against Clarksville. Again, this was another game that was pretty much over in the third quarter after building a 28-6 lead at halftime. White goes and scores 3 more times in the third quarter, and they were up 50-12 at that point. Going to the fourth quarter, it's not very close. And with White, we talked last week about what was this team going to look like. Coach Yancey comes in, takes over. It's all about wing tee. It's what he ran at Frisco. It's been his way of life through the football world. But the rumors and how they were going to approach things offensively this season going to change a little bit. And they were able to do that, at least for the opener. And maybe it's kind of showing everybody, here we go. This is what it's going to look like now. Colt Yancey is 7 of 9 passing for 208 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also ran for a score. Easton Helgren, 4 catches, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also returned a kickoff, 60 yards, and had a 37-yard run in there as well. Gage Walker, 9 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Also, his lone catch was a 56-yard touchdown as well. It's one of those deals where you look at what White was able to do here, and you go, there was a balance. They're running for 228 yards, also throwing for the 208 yards. The balance in terms of nobody got double-digit carries, spreading the ball around there still. Let's see, what was that? 2, 4, 6, 8 guys with carries. Obviously, huge plays in the passing game. And if that's a sign of things to come for White, that was the big thing last year was they really struggled to score. They were able to be very good defensively, or at least average defensively. The problem just was they weren't able to put points upon the board to match people. And here they are right off the bat, 57 points, the most they've ever scored in a season opener since 2006. The last time they scored that many in an opener was 1999. The last time they scored that many in any game was 2006. So the question's going to be, can you keep that up? Maybe not 57, but can you have that balance? Can you keep people on their heels because they don't know where you're gonna go with the ball? And the team that's going to be the first to test that theory is a familiar one for them, much like Clarksville has been the opener every year for a while now. White Red's going to host Celeste at 7 o'clock on Friday. Celeste is 0-1, and this is an interesting game in terms of if you want to start making those comparisons for your district, because Celeste lost last week 36-0 against Trenton, who is obviously in White Red's district. So if you want to play the early, comparative score game to kind of see how even those teams are for when they get to district play, this is obviously a chance to do that. Again, this is a game that's been played every year. This is, I think, year 5 that they've played. Yes, this is the 5th straight year they've played. So again, you have 2 teams that have played each other, know each other. Celeste is normally pretty good. They've made the playoffs 6 of the last 9 seasons. But obviously that's an interesting start for them to not only lose to a rival, a district rival for White Red, but to lose as badly as they did. So that's intriguing just for what that might mean. And again, you have a chance with Whitwright to go 2-0. This was a team that struggled to get wins last year, to get off to that 2-0 start, to show things are going in the right direction, that they're able to score the points that they put up the first week. Do that again next week, and hey, now you're really getting people's attention, that it wasn't a 1 week wonder or opponent dependent type of thing, that they're able to kind of do it in multiple ways, which was something that they talked about before the season, that they were going to be more diverse, more multiple offensively, to where people couldn't just focus on certain things. So Whitewright's going to host Celeste at 7:00 on Friday, and then right down the road, Tom Bean will be hosting Parish Chisholm also at 7:00 on Friday, and the Tomcats are coming off a 49-30 victory against Cumbie. And this was, again, another game where Tom Bean got off to the fast start. They're up 35-14 at halftime. Cumbie scored a couple times in the fourth quarter to make it a little that final score a little closer. But again, another good start for a team that considers itself in the playoff mix. After not being allowed last year, they were in the top 4 in the district. And this was another good start to the season for them. Donnie Hooten took over at quarterback. This year goes 22 of 28 passing for 258 yards, 4 touchdowns, an interception, ran for a score. Last year's quarterback, Bobby Rogers, shifting over to running back. We talked about that in the preview and how that was going to change things for Tom Bean. He ran 9 times for 71 yards and scored twice. Brody Pearson, 6 catches, 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. Hagan Darney, 6 catches for 65 yards and 2 touchdowns. Garrett Kelly, 3 catches for 58 yards. And again, that's what people expected out of Tom Bean. Even with the quarterback change, a really good athlete taking over at that spot. Spreading the ball around. Did have the interception, but outside of that, to go 22 of 27 on the other throws. They spread the ball around as well, like we mentioned, with the 3 guys that were out there. They had 4 guys with at least 3 catches, and 5 with multiple. And they put up some good numbers there, to where you go, okay, this is a really good starting point for a team that has playoff aspirations, and they're going to have, I think, a good a better test with Parish Chisholm, who's also 1-0. They won 21-14 last week against Hughes Springs, and I'm interested to see again what it's always so difficult when you have the week 1 stuff. How are people going to react? How are people going to handle, if they have success, if they didn't, if they lost their game, what's the caliber of the next opponent compared to the first one? And I'm interested to see, like I said, if Tommy gets off to a 2-0 start, I really think that's they've improved every year. I think they can improve for a 3rd straight year. And beating a Cumbie, beating Parish Chisholm, that's a step in that direction. If they're going to compete for a district title, which I think that they believe that they can. So Tom Bean's going to host Parish Chisholm 7:00 on Friday night, and somebody in that game is going to be 2-0, and we'll see if it's Tom Bean after that matchup. There are 2 other games left. Unfortunately, the teams that we have here now lost their openers. We'll start with SNS. They dropped their opener 31-15 against Comanche, Oklahoma. We talked about they were making that trip up across the Red River to open their season. New head coach. Obviously, the last 2 teams we're going to talk about both have new head coaches. And I think it was a little bit of a mixed bag for SNS. We talked about, obviously, they had struggles offensively during their winless season last year. In this one, Hunter Corville takes over at quarterback. 8 carries for 8 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown, and he also threw for 125 yards and a score. Joe Orr had 4 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. Kenny Melton ran 10 times for 83 yards, and so that part was better. It wasn't, it wasn't enough to get a win, but relatively speaking, compared to last year's outputs in a lot of games, that's a huge improvement. It was a game that was 24 to 15 at halftime, and so you're right there. You're competitive, and I think for the first to go on the road, obviously face somebody that you don't know a whole heck of a lot about, and to have the game be single digits at halftime. Compared to what a lot of those kids dealt with last year, I think it's a good sign. And I think if you can find a way to get some improvement on a weekly basis and be competitive in a lot of the games, that's obviously what you need to see from this group, because they haven't had a whole lot of that competitiveness with opponents in their time on the varsity. They're taking on Prairieland at home at 7:30 on Friday. Prairieland's 1-0. They also took on an Oklahoma school last week. That's kind of an interesting twist. They won 34-0 against Tishomingo. It's going to be interesting. Is there a bit of confidence with the Rams to know they can compete with people, to have some of the success that they had? Can they carry that over? Against a team that is coming off a big win, and maybe is going to overlook S&S because of the recent history, because of the fact that the Rams have lost 17 games in a row. They know that history. They weren't a part of that. The last time these two teams met was 2017. So it's been a while. But there is that chance that S&S could be overlooked by Prairieland in this game. So we'll see what happens with that on Friday night out at Rams Stadium. And the last game, to recap from Week 1, was the last game to finish because of a lightning delay. Out to the west was Howell losing to Boyd 44-13. It was a game that finished. If it wasn't after midnight, it was pretty close to it, because of a lightning delay that kept them from starting at 7:00. But they played it and they finished it. Boyd jumped out to the early lead, 14-0 after the first quarter. Both of Howell's touchdowns came in the second quarter. They were both scored by Braden Ulmer. He finished with 10 carries for 80 yards and the 2 touchdowns. He also led them in receiving with 4 catches for 39 yards. Bryce Piper had 14 carries for 51 yards. Riken Cross had 2 catches for 20 yards and a 23-yard run as well. And again, a team in the first game under a new head coach, Andrew Harvey, not a new face, obviously being the defensive coordinator last year. They had moments. You fall behind by a couple scores. You find a way to get back in it. It's a game at halftime. If you look at some of the bright side for Howe, they forced three turnovers. Boyd only had 65 yards on the ground, 22 carries for 65 yards. Again, this is another team with a lot of younger guys in some key spots. And how are they going to handle it? They're going to host Bonham on Friday night at 7:30. Bonham beat Pilot Point 7-6. And I feel like that was a late score. I feel like it was 6-0 Pilot Point for much of that game. And it's a Bonham team that only won one game last year. And so if they have a chance, if they win this one, they'll be 2-0 after being 1-9 last year. And again, they're probably looking at Howe saying, well, we can go to their place and win. But again, they almost lost to a Pilot Point team that didn't win a game last year. So I think both teams probably looked at this game and said, hey, that's a game that we think we can win. I don't know how much better Boyd was, than Pilot Point. Obviously, those teams, I believe they're still in the same district. So we'll know for sure at some point who actually is the better of those two teams. But right now that's just projection. But again, I think if you're Howe, you think you have a chance in this game. Obviously, you look at that other score and you go, okay, well we can, that's a team I think we can compete with. And again, I think for Howe, with all the newness and a lot of that, the question is going to be, can you get better every week? Can you show how competitive you are when district rolls around? Because they're in a district where I think at the very least the last playoff spot is up for grabs, and I think any of the teams below, Gunner for sure, Bells for sure, and probably Leonard as the third team, that fourth spot could be up for grabs, pending injuries and all that other stuff. But so I think if you can make a jump from week 1 to week 2, if you're Howe, into a competitive game or even win a game, again, that's going to go a long way towards them being competitive once district play rolls around. So those are all the games this week. Very interesting start in a lot of games. Again, I think we've got some fun stuff happening in week 2. And again, that's the plan every week on the podcast. We look at what happened, we talk about what will happen, and what it all means. And so that's the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you taking the time to add it to your podcast list. And again, if you want to follow stuff, not just the podcast, previews, whether it's team previews, individual team previews, scores, updates, all that good stuff, on Facebook at Herald Democrat, at All-Texomaland. The All-Texomaland feed is strictly high school sports, so if that's all you're interested in, give that a follow. All the stories, all the stuff gets posted there after it goes on our website. And of course, on Twitter, it's always Twitter to me. It will always be Twitter to me. At Jason De La Rosa, you'll get scores, you'll get updates from the games I'm at, you'll get top performers of the prior week games, all that good stuff. So be sure to follow that. And thanks again for listening to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.